Did you read it? Will you read it? Oh, yeah, this is Just Read It MCKay. I'm MC.
And I'm Kay.
Today, we will be resuming our review and deep dive of A Court of Mist and Fury, discussing chapters 51 through 55. This episode, we'll see some solitude when Feyre processes her shock, some girl time with more, explanations, understanding, and chapter 55. Need we say more? That being said, listeners, just a side note, we will be overviewing some of the explicit content, so keep in mind that will be coming at the end of the episode if you would like to skip past it. Wrap up in a blanket or cool off in front of the AC, depending on where you're at. Grab your favorite bookie beverage, and let's get started.
Woo! That's perfect. I love it. And chapter 55, because everybody knows chapter 55,
Chapter 55 is.
right? That's pretty funny. What am I doing? Book. We're talking about the book. It's going to be a day. All right. We ended last episode with Rhys finally being healed enough to winnow him and Feyre back to the Illyrian war camp, right after she finds out from the serial that he is her mate. Officially, it has been officially confirmed. They are mates. He knew, suspected for a very long time, but actually knew since about Under the Mountain, which we're going to learn a little bit more in the next couple of chapters. He knew. A couple people in the inner circle knew. Other people in the inner circle guessed or assumed. And so at this point, it's really just Feyre who doesn't know. And so she is super pissed off, probably a little hurt as well that no one chose to tell her. But at the same time, like, she wasn't really in a good place to hear it at any point until about now. So should he have told her, like, the day before when they were flying around before he was captured? Probably. But they got interrupted before he could. That's where we're at. Feyre now is asking more to take her someplace far, far away because she needs a break. She needs some space. She needs to digest everything that she's just learned and figured out how she feels about it. Moore is one of the people who does know already that they are mates, and that's because Rhys just freaked out as soon as he found out, and Moore happened to be the next person that he saw, so that's how she knows. She essentially begs Moore to take her someplace. Moore is torn between doing what Feyre is asking because she understands where Feyre's coming from, to an extent, obviously, but also Rhys is her cousin, her friend, and her High Lord, and he is still hurt.
She's torn between which side to take.
Moore finally agrees to take her. She left him lying in the mud and stormed towards the house.
I said she is big mad. She's not just mad.
She's big
she
mad.
Is mad.
She's super
but
mad.
I have to say, I had to leave a note myself where Moore decides to take her and get her away, because for me, that spoke to Moore's background. We know she had her own trauma, and we also know that she's the one that had her hands on Feyre to break her out from that isolation. So she knows what it would mean if she forced her to stay in that moment. And I think that that was just something that spoke volumes for the kind of soul Moore still has through everything she's been through.
Yeah, I agree completely. So Moore takes her to a little cottage or cabin up in the mountains. There is pretty much nothing around but snow because the spring hasn't officially hit and melted all the snow yet. So it is just mountains, trees, and snow all around her, and that's it. The house itself is warded so that no one can winnow in and out. So they actually have to winnow to like the front yard and then walk up to the house. And I think it's kind of funny because they get there and Moore is telling her about the house. No one can get beyond this point where they winnow. She says, actually, without our family's permission. And then she kind of pauses and like, and you're allowed in too. And Feyre is just like, because I'm his mate? Is that why? And Moore's response is, did you guess or did he tell you? And Feyre tells her what really happened. And she's like, the serial told me after I went to hunt it down for information on how to heal him. At that point, Moore is like, crap, Rhys is obviously more hurt than she kind of realized when she ferreted Feyre away. And Moore asks, is he all right? And Feyre's response is, he'll live. Whether he's all right now, probably not, but he'll live. And that's what's important. Moore gives her a little bit more background in regards to the cabin, that it was used for reflection when they were younger, that their parents would send them up there. Rhys would smuggle in books and booze. As Feyre is going through the cabin, checking it out, looking through all of the drawers, she does find lots of different things when it comes to weapons, because these people just have weapons all the time, at least according to all of the drawers and the cabinets, and all of the hiding places in this little cabin are filled with weapons. But there's also a lot of gear in there as far as doing outdoor activities, sports games, stuff like that. So it looks like the type of place where the inner circle comes as a way to get away from the city, a way to get away from their responsibilities, and to give themselves a chance to kind of hang out just as a family. And Feyre realizes that this is a cabin for a family. It's not massive. It doesn't have a million rooms. It is suited to them as far as it's built, where the chairs, the bed, the tub are all big enough for Illyrians with wings, but it is a cabin for a family. Moore tells her that there is magic to the house, that it will essentially provide what she needs. She won't have to start a fire or keep her fire going. The house will do that. The house will change the sheets, make sure there's enough food for her. It's going to provide most of what she might need while she's there. If Feyre asks Moore not to tell Rhys where she is, Moore responds with, "He'll try and find you no matter what. Tell him I don't want to be found, at least for a little while." And Moore goes to say, "It's not my business, but," and Feyre cuts her off. "Then don't say anything," because she's not ready to talk about it even with Moore. She just needs to think and digest and figure it out on her own, and then maybe she'll be willing to talk to somebody else. Moore does say something anyway. She does say, "He wanted to tell you, and it killed him not to, but I've never seen him so happy as he is when he's with you, and I don't think that has anything to do with you being his mate." So this is the second person in the inner circle, the other female in the inner circle, who has made a comment in this regards to Feyre of how much Rhys has come alive, how happy he seems compared to how he was before Feyre, so between Under the Mountain and Feyre coming, as well as before Under the Mountain, that he is a completely different person around her, and that it is because of how happy Feyre makes him and how much he loves her, which we're going to get more details in the next couple of chapters. Feyre does say thank you for bringing me. Moore says, "I'll check back in a couple of days," and then she leaves. This is when Feyre goes exploring, or starts to explore the cabin. She takes a nice hot bath because she hasn't had a bath in a couple of days. I think it's interesting because at this point she talks about it's been 3 days since she had a bath and she desperately needs one. She's gotten so used to being able to bathe whenever she chooses, whereas when they were starving and poor, she mentions that it was too much of a hassle to actually get water for her and her family to bathe. So they would go weeks without bathing. And now she's back to a point she doesn't even like going 3 days without being able to bathe. She does think about what happened with Rhys before she went to see the Suriel, which I love because we talked about it in last episode that she kind of went into what Rowan in Throne of Glass called the killing calm, where all of her baser self takes over and she is able to focus on doing what she needs to do to get Rhys back. And she does say, because he was injured, I had gone out of my mind, absolutely insane when he'd been taken away from me, shot out of the sky like a bird, and I'd acted on instinct, on a drive to protect him that had come from so deep in me. And she cuts off the thought, probably thinking along the lines of the need that came up in her was so deep, it harkens to the mate bond, that it was a drive from so deep within her because some part of her at least recognized that Rhys was incredibly important to her, even if she didn't know what to call it yet. And at this point, she does feel a little bit of relief in regards to how quickly she moved on after Tamlin, because she's been struggling with that through most of this book. She wants to be with Rhys, she wants to move on, she wants to at least have a physical connection, if not more, but she's concerned that she's moving on too quickly from Tamlin. She loved him, but she is so quickly moved past that because of everything that happened, and she felt bad. She was letting those thoughts kind of weigh her down, those negative thoughts being portrayed and pushed back in on herself. But beneath all of that is a throb of relief that her relationship with Tamlin had been doomed from the start because she had left him only to find her mate, to go to her mate.
Loved how through this section of the writing, it's so genuine. She's in her head. You know, you're looking at the positive, the negative, the hey, I'm okay with this, but maybe I'm not. But hey, let's look at this point of view, that point of view. I think we've all talked about the overthinking past that you can have. And
Right?
just it's written so genuinely, especially if you think back to the podcast Sarah was on that we watched and just how she expressed herself in these pages to then end the passage with the first reference of saying my mate. It was just heart wrenching. Like, I think that rereading it after so long, this is what finally sucked me, past the point of I just want to read it to get to the good part and like actually
Right?
immerse myself into it. So definitely a strong one there. Just the well,
Yes.
Tamlin, but this, but Rhys, but maybe, and I know why he did it, but does he want me? But is it?
Right? Yep, it's just so relatable when you break up with someone and you're not quite sure. Like, it depends on where you were in the relationship. If you've already grieved the relationship, you're ready to move on faster. Whereas if you're being broken up with and you haven't had time to grieve the relationship, so you have to take that time. So yeah, I think it just makes her a little bit more relatable in regards to the inner monologue that we have and her concern with going back and forth between Rhys and Tamlin. She ends up realizing that he had known she was going to react poorly, that it would hurt her more than help her to know about it right after she came from the spring court to the night court. So she can kind of understand why Rhys didn't tell her initially, but she does still feel like she should have been told sooner than now. And then it didn't excuse the weeks when she'd hated herself for how much she wanted him. And she realizes that Mor and Amryn had known, and she can't decide how she feels about that. She's frustrated with it because they didn't say anything, but at the same time, they're friends with Rhys. They've been a part of his life for over 500 years. So it's difficult. I think Feyre is trying to kind of reconcile knowing all of that with how much hurt she's currently feeling. And then she remembers that she had told Rhys she would not walk away from him, that she saw him, and yet that is exactly what she did. I'd run away precisely how Rhys expected me to run, how I told him anyone in their right mind would run from him. Like a coward, like a fool, I'd left him injured in the freezing mud, and I'd walked away a day after I told him he was the only one I wouldn't walk away from. So she realizes that, yes, she is very hurt and very upset, but her response to that was also to do something she said she'd never do, and therefore hurt Rhys in response. And she realizes that she demanded honesty, and then at the first true test of it, she hadn't let him be honest with her. She had just walked away without letting him give her the explanation of why he didn't tell her, and then she'd refused to see him and walked away, and maybe I shouldn't have. She shouldn't have reacted the way that she did, but she's still a little hurt. She needs time to process everything and isn't ready to actually come back and apologize just yet. So she does spend a couple of days in the cabin. The following day, she starts to get bored and just starts going through every single nook and cranny, drawer that she can find, cabinet that she can open up to see what's in it. She does end up finding some paint, and she ends up painting like the remaining 2 days that she's there before Mor comes back. That's all she does. She sleeps a little bit, eats a little bit, and then goes right back to painting. And we talked about this, I think, a little bit in the last episode in regards to Feyre's painting. Is she a good artist? Is she not a good artist? Obviously, we have no actual idea on whether she's a good painter or not. Personally, I don't know that I would want anyone painting my house other than me, but that's because I'm a control freak and I have to control everything. So I would not allow or not be happy with Feyre painting my entire cabin. And we don't know for sure like how Rhys and Mor feel about it either. Because the way that they word their responses is, I mean, it's not discouraging, but they're not like jumping up with joy because of all of the painting. Because at this point, Feyre has painted all over the cabin, different scenes. She's painted wings on the fireplace. She has Mor's hair in one spot. She's painted eyes up above the mantle, above the doorways, flowers, landscapes. She has painted all over the place.
See, And I went back to, because I think I texted you guys and let you know that when I was first doing my read through, I'm cracking up. I couldn't take this part seriously. So I had to just read through it and then go back today and actually reprocess. And I left myself a sticky about same thing where when she's actually mixing the colors for Moore's eyes, that made me start thinking, okay, I feel like she's got to be decent at painting. And then I feel
Right?
like at the start of 53, before Moore heads out, it mentions that she had painted some rudimentary stick figures. So the fact that it was describing and highlighting Moore's lack of skills, I figure maybe she's at least above a novice. You know, she's got some skill there,
Right?
maybe. But I reading it the first time, I was cracking up the whole time. I can't look at these theories before I read these passages. It's gonna make it to a total change of reaction. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was hilarious.
Moore then comes back after the 3 days, and I love it. She's knocking and saying out loud, please don't be dead, before Feyre even has a chance to open the door. And Feyre, when she hears Moore's voice, isn't sure whether it's relief or disappointment that sank in my chest as I opened the door and found Moore standing there instead of Rhys. So Moore comes in, and yes, they get to spend the evening together. Moore spends the night. They get to chat, have some girl time. Um, Moore ends up painting some stick figures as well to put her touch on all of the painting in the cabin. But I think it's funny because Feyre has painted Amren's eyes above the doorway into the bedrooms, and Moore's response is like horror. She grimaces. Why on earth are Amren's eyes there? And Feyre says because she's always watching. Because I feel like that's so true. Amren is always watching. Like she knows everything. This is when Moore tells her that the guys come up here and they get drunk and they go fishing and hunting, and they just spend an entire week straight just drinking and hanging out together. Moore says, you need to paint my eyes up there too so that I can look over, the guys whenever they're up here. And then she ends up saying, well, you better paint the guys up there too so that all four of them can watch out for Feyre while she's there. Feyre does ask about Rhys, and Moore says, that he's still pissed off at her for taking Feyre away and not telling him where she is. But he is recovering and fine. Moore, of course, encourages her to talk to him, make him stew over it a little bit, but in the end, hear him out because he has his reasons and he might be arrogant, but he's usually right about his instincts. He makes mistakes, but you should hear him out, which we've seen a little bit of a pattern where he does make mistakes. He's not perfect, but he does kind of learn from his mistakes as well. And Feyre, thinks in her head, well, I had already decided that I was going to do that. They talk a little bit about the Court of Nightmares to check on her dad. She does say that she may have snapped additional bones in his body the last time she visited, to the point where she is now banished from her parents' private quarters, which I love because she's like, such a shame I can't visit them anymore. Not a shame at all. She's happy to have done it. Feyre does mention, I'm surprised that they are still alive, and gives her a little bit of an explanation that Rhys gave her permission the moment he became High Lord that she could kill her parents anytime she wanted to, and that they even know that that's the case, but she has chosen not to, so that the communication between the Court of Nightmares and the Court of Dreams remains as unhindered as possible. It's still not a great connection between the two, but I'm sure if they killed Moore's parents, who are kind of the stewards and leading, then it might hinder the relationship between the two courts. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out eventually. She does mention that Cassian and Azriel would enjoy killing them as well, ripping them to pieces, and that maybe she'll give that to them as a solstice gift down the road. She'll allow them to kill her parents, and that'll be her solstice gift to them. Interesting solstice gift. Feyre, of course, being the busybody that she is, like everybody else in this court, asks about her relationship with Azriel. She mentions, you told me about that one time with Cassian. What about Azriel? Have you ever been with him? And Moore laughs, says, nope, after that time with Cassian, I swore off of all of Rhys's friends, but don't worry because none of them have a shortage of lovers. Azriel might be better at keeping it secret, but he still has plenty. And then she goes on to say that the issue wouldn't be her if she and Azriel ever actually took their friendship to another level, that it would be him. That even if Rhys made him Prince of Valaris, he'd still see himself as a bastard born nobody, not good enough for anyone. Which gives us a little more insight into Azriel, but again, we don't have a lot of information. Like, out of all these characters, he and Amryn we get the least bit of information on. So we don't know if what she's saying is just her perspective, what she thinks, or if that's actually the case. And she goes to ask if Moore is interested in Azriel, and Moore's response is, "Why are you asking such things?" Which is such a Rhys-Anne response. Like, you can tell they're related based on their response to her sometimes. She tries to cover it up. Like, she just wants the answers, but she tries to cover it up by saying, "I'm still trying to figure out how all of you work together." And more, her response is a snort. "We have 5 centuries of tangled history for you to sort through. Good luck." And then Moore asks, would it be so bad to be his mate? And Feyre's response is no. No, it would not be. So the next morning, Moore does leave, and she left after breakfast. Feyre is looking out across the clearing where the cabin sits, and briefly she can kind of see a possible future, not just for herself, a life for herself, but a life here in this place with the inner circle as a family, and specifically a life with Rhys-Anne and their children. That they would come up here to this mountain or to the cabin in the mountain, run through the meadows, feast on berries, go hunting, those kinds of things. And then they would go home to Valaris, where she would finally walk through the artist quarter, open up her own shop, not to sell her work, but to teach others. And then she would go home every night exhausted, but content, fulfilled, and happy, which I think is huge for her because she's finally starting to realize what she wants after Under the Mountain and after Tamlin. And it is the things that Rhys-Anne is already starting to give her. And she's finally realizing that she wants him to be a part of that life. And this is a future I saw for myself, bright as the sunrise over the Sidra. It did not seem so listless, so empty anymore. And I would fight until my last breath to attain it or to defend it. So 5 days after that, she continues painting every room in the cottage. Moore has winnowed in some additional food for her and additional paints throughout the last couple of days. And then one evening after she's taken a bath, there's a knock on her door, and when she goes to answer it, it is not Moore, it is Rhys. And he has finally figured out where she is. He has flown all over the place because we find out he didn't use his magic because that's how they're tracking him. So he had to do it the old-fashioned way by flying. So he flew all over the place to try and figure out where she was and finally discovered her here in the cabin. And he's standing on the doorstep waiting for her to invite him in. And I love what she sees when she describes him, the beautiful, strong, selfless male who had sacrificed and wrecked himself for his family, his people, and didn't feel it was enough, that he wasn't enough for anyone. And I wondered if Rhys, if he somehow felt the same about me. And she stepped aside, holding the door open to let him in.
The relief through the bond as he steps in the house.
Right? Like, she says, I could have sworn I felt a pulse of knee wobbling relief through the bond. Like that's
happy
just the
tears.
first step, right? And he's so happy that she's letting him in. And of course, he studies the doorway into the bedrooms and sees all of the eyes up there and says, you do know that one of them is going to paint a mustache under the eyes of whoever pisses them off that day. And her response is, Moore already promised to do that. So then he asks why she didn't paint his eyes. And she says, I was afraid to paint them. At first, because I was so mad at you for not telling me. Then, because I was worried I'd like them too much and find that you didn't feel the same. Then, because I was scared that if I painted them, I'd start wishing you were here so much that I'd just stare at them all day. And it seemed like a pathetic way to spend my time, which just cracks me up. I love it. And his response is to try really hard not to smile and then say, indeed. And that's it. She asks how he's doing. He is healed completely thanks to her because she gave him her blood. And then she is about to, she has recently bathed after painting all day. And she is about to make herself food and says, okay, well, I'm going to make food. Do you want some? Not realizing that this is a integral part of the mate bond, but she realizes based on Rhys's response to her offering to make him food that there is something going on. So she's okay, I don't know the rules, so you need to explain them to me. And this is when he says it's an important moment when the female offers the male food, and it goes back to whatever beast they were long ago, but the first time still matters. That some mated pairs, they'll make an occasion of it, throw a party so that the female can formally offer her mate food. That's usually done among the wealthy, but it means that the female accepts the bond. And Feyre essentially says, will you tell me the story, tell me everything, while she cooked and decided whether or not she was going to offer him food or not. So he goes into a long story, and I'm going to try not to just read through the whole thing because I just want to do that. So we're going to try and just pull bits and pieces of it. Rhys goes way back to the war 500 years ago to start his explanation. And the reason he does this is because he wants Feyre to understand the past relationship that he has with Amarantha, because that leads into what happened under the mountain and why he made choices under the mountain and to go under the mountain. So that's the reasoning why he goes so far back in history to try and explain to her everything. Because that's what she wants. She wants to know everything so that she can make the best decision. So he talks about being captured by Hybern's forces, by Amarantha specifically. Him and his legion are captured. That the chains they had used on him a couple of nights ago were very similar to the ones that they used to chain him during the war as well. That's one of Hybern's greatest assets, stone delved from deep in their land, capable of nullifying a high phase power. So Rhys is captured by Amarantha. He is tortured. They attempt to break him by killing his men, which is obviously super hard for him. She kind of watches her for multiple days, figures out her pattern when the guards reset, all of that, and plans his attack for killing her, and has decided that it doesn't matter if he breaks free as long as he is able to kill her. She was so focused on killing Jurian because of what Jurian did to her sister Clythia, that the day before Rhys was going to kill her or enact his plan, Amarantha and Jurian meet on the battlefield, and Amarantha wins and drags Jurian back to her camp, and then spends the next couple of weeks torturing him. So because of that, Rhys isn't able to kill her. He isn't able to make his stand because she is now hidden away in her side of the camp. Torturing Jurian. Because Amarantha is distracted, torturing Jurian, Rhys' father and his soldiers are able to come in and rescue Rhys. However, his father is upset that Rhys got caught to begin with, so he does not allow Azriel or the other guards to remove the ash spikes from his wings as punishment. So because of that, it takes him a little bit longer to heal, and the healers inform him that he can't fight, he can't fly until his wings are completely healed, or he won't fly again. It's towards the end of the war, the last couple of battles are being fought, and he ends up going to the cabin with Azriel and Cassian so that he is able to heal completely. And it's during those weeks that they're there that the war ends and the treaty is made. So they're not a part of it, they just hear about it afterwards. With the treaty, all of the human slaves had to be set free. The Night Court didn't have human slaves at that point because they couldn't be trusted. He does mention that each one of them came back different from the war because they were all spread out into different legions during the war and they weren't able to be together. And that Amarantha was spared as well as the King of Hybern, and they didn't have to pay retribution or anything along those lines. So Rhys, of course, is very upset that he isn't able to get retribution on Amarantha. And then when Amarantha came back, 100 years ago, which was multiple hundred years after the war, when she came back, she was able to kind of worm her way in with the other High Lords of Prythian to extend different trade agreements with them. But Tamlin didn't trust her at all. Didn't trust Amarantha when she came back the second time. And Rhys says, even though I hated him, he'd known Amarantha personally, and if he didn't trust her, I knew she hadn't changed at all. So he plans to kill her. That's the whole reason he goes under the mountain, is because he plans to kill Amarantha, and that's why he doesn't take anyone from the inner circle with him, because he doesn't want them to know that he's going to take a step in regards to revenge. He's kind of becoming part of the Court of Nightmares in this instance, whereas they are more focused on the Court of Dreams. So that's when the party is thrown under the mountain, where Amarantha serves the wine and ends up taking all of the powers from the High Lord. And that Rhys had mere seconds to decide what to do as he felt his power draining away from him and into her. And that's when he made the decision to save Valaris, since it had already been protected for thousands of years. No one else knew about it. He used the last of his power to bind his friends, the inner circle, so that they had to remain in Valaris or risk that protection collapsing. And he used the last dregs to tell them mind to mind what was happening and to stay away. And within a few seconds, my power wholly belonged to Amarantha. Amarantha slaughters half the Night Court. Those that he took with him, again, most of them are from the Court of Nightmares side and not the Court of Dreams. But she killed half of them in vengeance for Tamlin's father, since Rhys and his father killed Tamlin's father. And he says, I knew in that moment there was nothing I wouldn't do to keep her from looking at my court again, from looking too long at who I was and what I loved. So I told myself that it was a new war, a different sort of battle. And that night, when she kept turning her attention to me, I knew what she wanted. I knew it wasn't about sleeping with me so much as it was getting revenge at my father's ghost. So I made her beg and scream and use my lingering powers to make it so good for her that she wanted more. So she kept coming back to him so that she could keep her close and keep her from searching and finding everything that he loved. And he says, and then she cursed Tamlin, and my other great enemy became the one loophole that might set us free. Which is like, that whole scenario is just completely heartbreaking for Rhys, because now he has to be essentially dating one enemy of his, while the only way he can be set free is in the hands of another enemy of his. And he says, after a decade, I stopped expecting to see my friends or my people again. I forgot what their faces looked like and stopped hoping. So he is crying at this point, or getting really close to it. There are tears in his eyes. He does cry as he's explaining all of this to Feyre. I, of course, cry every time that I read this, because it's so heart-wrenching, and I love Rhys. But poor Rhys. And then he says he did begin to have dreams. At first, they were glimpses, as if I were staring through someone else's eyes. A crackling hearth in a dark home, a bale of hay in a barn, a warren of rabbits. The images were foggy, like looking through cloudy glass. I thought nothing of them until one of those images was a hand, this beautiful human hand holding a brush, painting flowers on a table. And that time, I pushed a thought back. So this is when Feyre is painting on the dresser for her and her sisters. She paints fire on Nesda's drawer, flowers on Elaine's drawer, and for herself, she paints the night sky and doesn't realize why. Well, now we know why. Because Rhys saw her painting the flowers on Elaine's drawer and pushed a thought back of the night sky, of the image that brought me joy when I needed it most. Open night sky, stars, and the moon. I didn't know if it was received, but I tried anyway. And that is why Feyre paints the night sky on her drawer. These dreams, these flashes of that person, that woman, I treasured them. They were a reminder that there was some peace out there in the world, some light, that there was a place and a person who had enough safety to paint flowers on a table. They went on for years. So he dreams of her for years. We don't know exactly how many, but multiple years while he's under the mountain. And he says, and then about a year ago, the time she went across the wall into the spring court, he said, this dream that was clearer and brighter, like that fog had been wiped away. And you, Feyre, was dreaming, and I was in your dream watching as you had a nightmare about some woman slitting your throat while you were chased by the bog. I couldn't reach you or speak to you, but you were seeing our kind, and I realized that the fog had probably been the wall and that you were now in Prythian. I saw through your dreams, and I hoarded these images, sorting through them over and over again, trying to place where you were. but you had such horrific nightmares, and the creatures belonged to all courts. I'd wake up with your scent in my nose, and it would haunt me all day. And then you dreamt about Calamai. I knew there was only one celebration that large, and then it was going to be in the spring court. So I told Amarantha that I wanted to go to the spring court celebration to spy on Tamlin to see if anyone was coming to conspire with him. So that is his excuse for getting out for the evening to go to Calamai to see her. And he got there, he can smell her, he tracks her scent, and that's when he finds the Picts trying to drag her into the woods. He says, I debated slaughtering them in there, but then they shoved you and I just moved. I started speaking without knowing what I was saying, only that you were there and I was touching you. And then Feyre remembers exactly what he said. There you are. I've been looking for you. Were his first words to me, not a lie at all, because he has been looking for her. And then his next words to her had been, thank you for finding her for me, because he has been looking for so long. And then Rhys says, and I knew you had no idea who I was, that I might have been seeing your dreams, but you hadn't been seeing mine. So I told myself, you were just human, you were so young and breakable, and had no interest in me whatsoever. And I knew if I stayed too long, someone would see and report back and she'd find you. So I started to walk away, thinking you'd be glad to be rid of me, but then you called after me, like you couldn't let go of me just yet, whether you knew it or not. And I knew we were on dangerous ground, that I could never speak to you or see you or think of you again. Because he realizes, maybe not at this point that she is his mate, but he has a pretty good idea. And so he's realized that if he wants to protect her, he has to give her up. He says, I didn't know why you were in Prithian. I didn't want to know your name because seeing you in the dreams had been one thing, but in person, right then, deep down, I think I knew what you were, and I didn't let myself admit it because if there was the slightest chance that you were my mate, they would have done such unspeakable things to you. So I let you walk away. I told myself after you were gone that maybe the cauldron had been kind, not cruel, for letting me see you just once, a gift for what I was enduring. Like just getting to see her and touch her once and talk to her, he thinks of as a gift, which is just like, that's so sweet. And then he tells her what happened afterward. That it did not go well when he came back to the under the mountain. That he did use the Picts, the ones who were going to do unspeakable things to her. He gets into their minds, gets them to tell Amarantha that they were there to try and find others to start a rebellion against her. He says, I didn't know that you were with Tamlin, that you were staying in the spring court, but Amarantha sent me back because I had been so successful at Calamai. She sends him back to the spring court, and that's when he is shown up to. He was there prepared to mock him, maybe pick a fight, but then he got into the room, smelled the familiar scent, saw the plate, and felt the glamour, and then realized there you were living in my second most enemy's house, dining with him, reeking of his scent, and looking at him like you loved him. And I decided that I had to scare Tamlin and scare you because I saw how he looked at you too. He tries to make Tamlin scared that Amarantha's going to get to Feyre because he doesn't want Amarantha to get to Feyre. It has nothing to do with Tamlin. And he says, so I made Tamlin beg as Amarantha made me beg to show him how powerless he was to save you. And so that's when Feyre gets sent back to the human realm. And Rhys says, but I was so selfish, so stupidly selfish that I couldn't walk away without knowing your name. And you were looking at me like I was a monster. So I told myself it didn't matter when you lied when I asked. I knew you did. I had your mind in my hands, and you had the defiance and foresight to lie to my face. So I walked away from you again. I vomited my guts up as soon as I left. And he says I checked back once to ensure you were gone, and I went back the day they sacked the manor to make sure my performance was complete. He does give us his little snippet on what happened with Claire, that because Amarantha had her cronies go out and get Claire so they could bring her back and torture her. Rhys does feel bad that he let that happen, that he is kind of the catalyst that killed Claire. But he does tell us that he went into Claire's mind and when she was brought under the mountain, took all of her pain away, told her to scream when expected to, so that she didn't feel any pain, but it still seemed like she was in pain. And then when she died without pain because he had taken it away. And he tells us that he still sees her, he still sees his men that were sacrificed when he was captured during the war, and others that I killed for Amarantha. He says, I thought it was done after that with Claire's death. Amarantha believed you were dead, so you were safe and far away, and my people were safe, and Tamlin had lost. So it was done. We were done. And he says, and this breaks my heart, I had never known such horror as I did when I watched you make that bargain. Irrational, stupid terror. I didn't know you. I didn't even know your name, but I thought of those painter's hands, the flowers I seen you create, and how she'd delight at breaking your fingers apart. And then when I learned your name, hearing you say it, it was like an answer to a question I've been asking for 500 years. Just the sound of her name, right? And he says, I decided then and there that I was going to fight. I would fight dirty and kill and torture and manipulate, but I was going to fight. If there was a shot of freeing us for Amarantha, you were it. I thought the cauldron had been sending me these dreams to tell me that you would be the one to save us, save my people. So I watched your first trial, pretending. And then when she's hurt afterwards, he sees this as his way to not only defy Amarantha, but to spread the seeds of hope to those who knew how to read the message, which again is so Rhys doing something for multiple reasons because he has a specific end game he's trying to get to, and a way to keep you alive without seeming too suspicious, and a way to get back at Tamlin. So he just like lists all these things. This is why I made you do the bargain for all of these things. To get back at Tamlin, to use him against Amarantha, yes, but to get back at him for my mother and sister, and for having you. When we made that bargain, you were so hateful that I knew I'd done my job well. And he says, so we endured it, and we went through it. I made you dress like that so Amarantha wouldn't suspect, but then I gave you the wine so that you wouldn't remember all of the horrors, not just the horrors that he makes her do, because in her mind, she wasn't enjoy dancing for him or with him or sitting on his lap, anything like that. But he also does it so that she can't remember all the other horrors that happened under the mountain outside of her trials. But he does say, and that last night when I found you two in the hall, I was jealous of him and pissed off that he'd used exactly what we talked about when we got to this chapter, pissed off that he used that one shot of being unnoticed not to get you out, but to be with you. He was jealous, and Amarantha saw that jealousy. She saw me kissing you to hide the evidence, but she saw why. For the first time, she sees it. And at that point, Amarantha starts to question how devoted Rhys is to her, that she keeps him longer than usual that night, trying to squeeze answers from him, but that he gave her nothing. And afterward, I wanted to see you one last time alone. I thought about telling you everything, but who I'd become, who you thought I was, I didn't dare shatter that deception. And then the final task comes and happens. And then Amarantha is torturing her. And Rhys says something snapped in a way I couldn't explain, only that seeing you bleeding and screaming undid me. It broke me at last. So it's very similar to how Feyre words when Rhys is taken from her and is hurt, and she has to do everything that she can to get to him and save him. Rhys had a very similar response just way back at the beginning. I knew right then what you were. I knew that you were my mate and you were in love with another male and had destroyed yourself to save him, and I didn't care about that. If you were going to die, I was going to die with you, and I couldn't stop thinking it over and over as you screamed as I tried to kill her. You were my mate, my mate, my mate. Very similar to what Feyre's response was, just repeating my mate over and over again. And then this part just shatters me. But then she snapped your deck, and tears are just rolling down his face as he's gotten to this part. And I felt you die. And Feyre, of course, is also crying because she realizes truly to what extent he cares for her. Like, this is more than just love, what he feels for her. And he says, and this beautiful, wonderful thing that had come into my life, this gift from the cauldron, was now gone. In my desperation, I clung to that bond, not the bargain. The bargain was nothing. The bargain was like cobweb. But I grabbed that bond between us and I tugged. I willed you to hold on, to stay with me, because if we could get free, then all 7 of us were there. All 7 High Lords could be able to give the gift to bring her back. And he says, I didn't care if I had to slice into all of their minds to do it. I'd make them save you. You'd freed us with your last breath. I wrapped my power around the bond, that mating bond. I could feel you flickering there, holding on. So he is the one that pulls her home. And this is when she kind of stops and remembers exactly what she had told the bone carver when he was talking to her about death. And what happened is that home had been at the end of the bond, not Tamlin, not the spring court, but Rhys, her home. And then Amarantha died. Rhys says, I spoke to the High Lords mind to mind, convincing them to come forward to offer that spark of power. None of them disagreed. I think they were too stunned to think of saying no. But again, I had to watch Tamlin hold you, kiss you. I wanted to go home to Valaris, but I had to stay to make sure things were set in motion and that you were all right. So I waited as long as I could and then sent the tug through the bond for her to come find him. That's when she comes up to the tower and they have a little chat on the top of the tower. And he says, I almost told you then, but you were so sad and tired. And for once you looked at me like I was worth something. So I promised myself that the next time I saw you, I'd free you of the bargain because I was selfish and I knew that if I let you go then, he'd lock you up and I'd never get to see you again, which is exactly what happened. And then he says, I went to leave, but I think transforming you into Faye made the bond lock into place permanently. That I'd known it existed, but it hit me so strong that I panicked. I knew if I stayed a second longer, I'd damn the consequences and take you with me, and you'd hate me forever. So again, Rhys could have taken her away when he realized the mate bond snapped into place, but he put her needs above his own and left instead. And this is when she remembers, of course, that he looked shocked and had kind of stumbled when they were talking up on top of the tower. And that's when he realized the mate bond had snapped into place. He says, I landed at the night court right as Moore was waiting for me, and I was so frantic, so unhinged that I told her everything. I hadn't seen her in 50 years, and my first words to her were, she's my mate. And for 3 months, I tried to convince myself you were better off without me. I felt you struggling to escape the darkness of Amarantha the same way I was. I heard you were going to marry him, and I told myself you were happy, that I should let you be happy, even if it killed me, even if you were my mate. You'd earned that happiness. So again, we talked about in the beginning of this book, everybody talking about how Tamlin had earned happiness when that's not the case. It's Feyre. And Rhys thought he could give her up if it meant that she was happy. So he plans to get drunk with Cassian, who has no idea what's going on. But then I felt you again. I felt your panic and your despair, and you said no, and I lost it. Which we talked about this when it happened, wanting to see like Rhys right before he winnows into the spring court at the wedding. So we do kind of in this get a little snippet of what happened. So he is panicking, winnows directly into the wedding and barely remembers who he's supposed to be and the part I was supposed to play. All I could see was you in your stupid wedding dress, so thin, so pale, and I wanted to kill him for it. But I had to get you out, had to call in that bargain just once to get you away to see if you were all right. So again, he puts his desire for vengeance against Tamlin behind her, making sure that she is all right. That is the most important thing. And then he says, it killed me to send you back, to see you waste away month after month. It killed me to know you were sharing his bed, not because you were my mate, but because I knew I was in love with you the moment I picked up the knife to kill Amarantha. So not only is it he recognizes the mate bond that connects the two of them, but he actually has true feelings for her. When you finally came here, I decided I wouldn't tell you any of it. I wouldn't let you out of the bargain because your hatred was better than facing the two alternatives, that you felt nothing for me or that you might feel something similar, and if I let myself love you, you would be taken away. And we know everything Rhys loves is always taken away from him. And then he talks about the day that they actually went to get her when Tamlin locked her in the house. He says, I would have killed him if he'd been there, but I broke some very fundamental rules in taking you away. Amren said if I got you to admit that we were mates, it would keep any trouble from our door, but I couldn't force the bond on you. I couldn't try to seduce you into accepting the bond either, even if it gave Tamlin license to wage war on me. You had been through so much already. I didn't want you to think that everything I did was to win you, just to keep my lands safe. So again, he puts her well-being above his High Lord status and his kingdom, all of his people. He's putting her well-being above it. And I love that he ends it with, but I couldn't stop being around you and loving you and wanting you. I still can't stay away. And the first thing she does is question, you love me? And Rhys nods. And she thinks, I wondered if love was too weak a word for what he felt, what he'd done for me, for what I felt for him. So she finally is realizing that she loves him just as much as he loves her, and then it might be a little bit more past love. So at that point, she offers him food, and Rhys is like shocked because she hasn't said anything else. And his response is, well, aren't you going to say anything? And she says, well, I was going to tell you what I decided the moment I saw you on the threshold. And Rhys says, and now? Like she's just dragging it out just to be a little butt. And he's like dangling on every one of her words. But she says, she sits in his lap, wraps her arms around him. And now I want you to know, Rhys, that I love you. I want you to know that I am broken and healing, but every piece of my heart belongs to you. And I am honored to be your mate, which I think really goes to show that she knows him in the words that she used by saying, I am honored to be your mate. She says, I love you and I'd endure every second of it over again so I could find you. And if war comes, we'll face it together. I won't let them take me away from you, and I won't let them take you from me either. And at this point, Rhys is crying again because he is finally getting his happiness. And so she turns things over like he kissed her tears under the mountain, and she starts kissing his tears away and breathes into him that you're mine. His body shuddered with what might have been a sob, but his lips found mine. He lays her out on top of the paints on the table because she still has paint all over the place, paint, brushes, everything. So he just kind of lays her right on top of the table. Food is forgotten so that they could enjoy each other. And I love that she mentions at one point that he knelt on those stars, the stars and mountains inked on his knees. He would bow for no one and nothing but his mate, his equal. She also talks about as they are having their first night together, that he has his wings out, which is a big deal because we talked about it in the past that he didn't have his wings out with Amarantha because they were important to him. And he's never actually been with a female while his wings are out because he didn't trust or care for them in the same manner that he trusts and cares for Feyre. So he has them out because she is his mate and he would yield only to me, that he was her friend through many dangers, her lover who had healed my broken and weary soul, and my mate who had waited for me against all hope despite all odds. And then finally the mate bond kind of snaps into place for her, and she says, I felt and saw and smelled that bond between us until our scents merged, and I was his and he was mine, and we were the beginning, the middle, and the end. We were a song that had been sung from the first ember of light in the world. So I don't know if the writing is done that way specifically, because I mentioned at one point Rhys's darkness being described as the darkness that existed before the world came into being. And now we get kind of a similar analogy in the sense that their bond was the beginning, the middle, and the end. They were a song that had been sung from the very first ember of light in the world. So, like, I don't know if that's just more of a talking about predestination in regards to they were predestined to be mates, and that's why she feels that way. She feels like this is something that has been planned since the beginning of time. I don't know. It just makes me wonder the way she words it. A little bit later, they're just kind of hanging out in between sessions. And Rhys says, I think I fell in love with you the moment I realized you were cleaving those bones to make a trap for the Middengard worm, or maybe the moment you flipped me off for mocking you. It reminded me so much of Cassian. For the first time in decades, I wanted to laugh. And she says, so you fell in love with me because I reminded you of your friend. And he says, I fell in love with you smartass, because you were one of us, because you weren't afraid of me, and you decided to end your spectacular victory by throwing that piece of bone at Amarantha like a javelin. I felt Cassian's spirit beside me in that moment and could have sworn I heard him say, "If you don't marry her, you stupid prick, I will." Which I love.
Favorite line in the book, bar none.
I love it. Because I also love that when we were in the summer court, Tarquin also mentions this exact moment. And we talked about it during that episode too, is the different perspectives from two different men. And that they're kind of felt attracted to her in that moment because of her retaliation against Amarantha. So I think it's fun to see both High Lords at that same point had feelings for her. And she ends up responding with, "I think I was falling in love with you for a while, but I knew on Starfall or came close to knowing and was so scared of it that I didn't want to look closer because I was a coward." And he says, "Well, you have perfectly good reasons to avoid it." And she says, "No, I didn't. Maybe thanks to Tamlin, a little bit I did, but it had nothing to do with Rhysand, nothing to do with him, that she was never afraid of the consequences of being with him, even if it meant every assassin in the world would hunt them. It was worth it because he is worth it." And then I love this part because they're just chatting and she's like, "Okay, so what happens next?" And she is talking about what happens next with the human queens and the King of Highburn and the war and all of that stuff. And Rhys is just thinking about her and their bond. And his response is, "Well, it's up to you. We can go back to Valaris and have the bond verified by a priestess. No one like Ianthe, don't worry. We can be declared officially mated. We can have a party, just dinner with our cohorts, our family, or we can have a huge party. But I think you and I are in agreement that we don't like parties." He says, "If you want, we could also go before a priestess and be declared husband and wife, as well as mates, if you want a more human thing to call me." And she says, "Well, what will you call me?" And he says, "Mates, though I'd also like calling you wife. That sounds mighty appealing too." And he says, "Or if you want to wait, we can do none of those things. We're mated, whether it's shouted across the worlds or not. There's no rush to decide." She says, "Well, I was asking about Jurian, the king, the queens, and the cauldron, but I'm glad to know I have so many options where our relationship stands, and that you'll do whatever I want. I must have you wrapped completely around my finger." And we're all just like, "Yes, yes, you do." And we're here for it. But I love Rhysand's response because he's like, "You cruel, beautiful thing." And then Rhysand goes on to tell her, "We're actually leaving tomorrow to go to your family's estate because the queens have agreed to come and see us." And her response is, "You're telling me this now?" And he says, "Well, I got sidetracked." Yeah, obviously, just a little bit. And she says his eyes twinkled, and the light of those eyes, the quiet joy, they knocked the breath from me. A future. We would have a future together. I would have a future, a life. And then Rhysand's smile starts to fade to something odd, reverent. And she goes to cup his face and realizes that her skin is literally glowing. So I'm going to mention this now, and later on we're going to talk about it. But the way she talks about how she is glowing. So faintly, as if some inner light shone beneath my skin, leaking out into the world, warm and white light. She starts to say like a sun, but then switches and says like a star. And Rhys kind of pulls focus away from her thoughts and says, "Well, now I can brag that I literally make my mate glow with happiness." And she asks, "Is this from Daycourt?" And he says, "I don't know." So we don't get an answer because I'm not convinced that it's from Daycourt. But then, as she is glowing, he lets the damper on his power go. As the full majesty of him was unleashed, he filled the room, the world, my soul, with glittering ebony power. Stars and wind and shadows, peace and dreams and honed edge of nightmares. Darkness rippled from him like tendrils of steam as he reached out a hand and laid it flat against the glowing skin of my stomach. That hand of night splayed, the light leaking through the wafting shower. They have their next round, and they do it in a specific way that helps Rhysand kind of get over the past trauma that he has. So they focus on kind of overriding past bad memories with good memories in similar fashion so that he registers that position with a good thing, with good memories instead of the past bad memories that he's had. And then she kind of shines her light a little bit brighter to banish the darkness that she can see in his eyes as he's struggling because of some of the past trauma that he has had when it comes to full stuff of the Amarantha. And it says, I unleashed that light in me, letting it drive out the darkness of what had been done to him, my mate, my friend. And I think the light pouring out of me might have been starlight. Starlight. Foreshadowing. Y'all don't know how yet, but foreshadowing. Rhys then tells her, we're going to have to find a way to put a damper on your light. She says, well, I can keep the shadows hidden easily enough. And he says, well, you only lose control of those when you're pissed off. And since I have every intention of making you as happy as possible, I have a feeling we'll need to learn to control the wondrous glow. And she says, always thinking, always calculating, because he is. That's just who he is. He's always thinking about different things. He's always calculating the next 10 steps in front of them.
Yeah. So with her vanishing, and it may be completely off topic from what you're saying, foreshadowing, because I know there's books I haven't read yet, but I got reminiscent feelings of Irene taking the darkness out of Kale when I was reading that. That's what that
Ooh.
took me back to. So, we talk ancient magic through all of it, past magic, and the way they were kind of juxtaposed to be the same way he had the darkness in him, where she was so pure. Obviously, it wasn't Starlight with her, but that's where my mind went with it. So when you first said foreshadowing, I was like, wait, is there a link there? Because that's what I had written down was Irene.
That's a fantastic point. That's not what I'm
How did I
referencing.
forget that?
That's not what I'm referencing,
Yeah.
but you are correct. And it makes me wonder because I have seen fan theories where people think that Rhys has some kind of Balg in him. So is it similar, just like you said, in how Irene's magic then pushed the darkness out of Kale? Is Feyre's magic also kind of pushing that darkness out of Rhys? If it is Balg, we don't know for sure. But that's a good point.
I guess I don't know if it's too far-fetched or not because of how it...
Oh no, not far-fetched at all. Just not what I was talking about, but that is a good point. I like that. Okay. So they do talk about when you agree to a mate bond, when you take that initial step to, what's the word?
when she accepts the
Accept.
box.
Oh my God. When you take the initial step of accepting the mate bond, he calls it the frenzy, hearkening back to the times when they were nothing more than beasts, probably ensuring, something along the lines of that the female is impregnated because you want each other so much that it's hard to separate after or for a certain amount of time after you accept the mate bond. So he talks about some couples don't leave the house for a week. Some males get so volatile that it can be dangerous to be around them in public, that he's seen males of reason and education shatter a room because another male looked too long in their mate's direction too soon after they'd been mated. And Feyre is instantly reminded of the time that Tamlin shattered the study because she accused him of drowning her, essentially, because of what he was doing. And Rhys says, I'd like to believe that I have more restraint than that, but he also said, Feyre, you need to be patient with me because I am attempting to put you above my baser instincts. So my reason and my logic, I try to keep those above my baser instincts. But you also have to understand that I still have those instincts and I'm trying to overcome them for you so that she doesn't get, not that she would ever become afraid of him like she was with Tamlin, but he just wants her to understand that he's going to do everything that he can to make sure that he doesn't take steps similar to how Tamlin did. They talk about getting pregnant. Feyre's response is, well, aren't I just supposed to get pregnant whenever possibly can because you're a high lord and I need to bear your heirs? And he says, no, that's not the case, which I love because that's exactly what was expected in the spring court. And he says, you are not expected to bear me anything. Children are rare, yes, so rare and so precious, but I don't want you to have them unless you want it, unless we both want them. And right now, with the war coming with Hybern, I'll admit that I'm terrified at the thought of my mate being pregnant with so many enemies around us. I'm terrified of what I might do if you're pregnant and threatened or harmed. So I think this has some foreshadowing because I specifically underline what I might do. So what Rhys might do. Because we're going to get into Nezda's book and Feyre is pregnant for that book, which one, I hate that she's pregnant so quickly after the war, but because they don't have a chance to enjoy being mated, whatever. But anyway, we'll talk about it when we get to Nez's book, because I have seen fan theories that discuss how far Rhys goes to protect Feyre while she is pregnant throughout that book. So I think this is a little bit of foreshadowing to that. But like I said, we'll talk about that when we get to Nez's book in a little bit. Feyre essentially says she wants to live first. She wants to enjoy her life for a little bit. She has finally found happiness. She finally knows what she wants and is to a point where she's actually able to obtain it. And she wants to enjoy life for a little bit. And then they can consider children, because she would be happy to give them to him. And his response is, you take all the time you need. And if I get you all to myself for the rest of eternity, then I won't mind that at all. But you do honor me with children, then I'd be more than happy to share that with you. So Rhys is okay one way or another, because at this point, all he wants is her. She is the only thing that matters right now. That's it. That's all we planned for this chapter.
That part gets me.
I know.
That part is my. If you couldn't tell.
I know, that's the whole chapter is just 2 chapters.
Yes, I actually
rough.
started tearing up that time.
That last
I
just the fear of knowing I can't have kids and reading of just very happy with the life I'm in. I think I'm also in my pre-marriage soft era at this point, because I've noticed the dresses I'm buying are very pastel and soft and flowy, and I think I'm
girly.
getting
You're
in
in
that.
a girly phase. Extra girly.
Sorry. Whoa. That. All right. I'm good.
That's okay, because it definitely, seeing how much Rhys has endured and chosen to endure, not just to get to Feyre, but just to get to any point in his life where he's happy with or without her, is just breaks my heart. That's what I struggle with. How much through all of that he doesn't feel he deserves it, that his goal is still just, as long as she's happy, then for me it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I need. It doesn't matter what I feel or what I want, as long as she is happy and she gets to do what she wants. Like, that just, I just love Rhys.
I swear, these books are the cheapest therapy I've ever had. I'm just saying. Book 5 was hard to get through,
goodness.
but
it is. That was 50, 54, 55. They're difficult, but they end on such a happy note. But it's a happy ending for those chapters, not necessarily for the book. We'll get there. We'll get there soon. Okay. Anything that we want to mention about that section? Okay.
I have a side note, though. Not related, but kind of related. People complain so much about those ACOTAR rings that there's now new sizes added.
Seriously?
Why do you tell us these?
I just got a text because it's exciting.
I saw the Alex and Ani text pop up about something, but I couldn't see what it was because I'm on Do Not Disturb. But that's awesome. I will have to check to see when my necklace comes. And bracelet, because I ordered a necklace and a bracelet. Thank you, Kay. All your fault.
Oh, fun side note, officially I've influenced 2 people into the Maasverse in some way.
See? That is the goal, right? Join us. There's cookies and wingspans. So our ending for tonight, that is all chapter 51 through 55. Crazy, heartbreaking, and absolutely beautiful section of chapters that we love. If you haven't read this book already, by this point you should already be on track with us. If you're not, then you need to go back and read it immediately. If you haven't, Kay mentioned Alex and Ani just came out with an ACOTAR set for jewelry. If you haven't purchased from them, you definitely should, because I already have. And that is our episode for tonight. So if you love fantasy books and magical worlds, large wingspans, and lots of banter, then this series is definitely for you. Join us next time as we jump into our next set of chapters, and we get to see Rhys actually come back after the mate bond. I love this part. I love what's coming next. So see everybody next time in our next episode. Thanks, everybody.